Thank you to those that have joined me this evening. This evening, we are going to have a chat about anxiety, an all-important subject that affects each and every one of us. So my name is Helen. I am with Odyssey The Platform, where you can find lots of other incredible chats. And I am trained as a cognitive hypnotherapist. I've studied NLP, I've studied Psych K, I've studied EFT, many modalities. I've also, as I'm sure many people here, have had personal experiences with anxiety, both good and bad. So those of you that are with us tonight, let's have a show of hands. Who has experienced anxiety within their life? Who's experienced it on quite a hard level? Thank you for sharing. Anybody experience it at the prospect of coming along this evening? Excellent. Just catching you out there. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit tonight about anxiety and how it manifests within the body, but then we're also going to go into solutions. I say solutions lightly because not everything works for everybody, but there are many different tools and techniques we can use that will hopefully help to alleviate, calm, bring it down. A lot of this is based on information that I've been trained in, but also by my own personal experience. I was actually the child to a very highly anxious mother. So I've had first-hand experience of potentially almost embodying that, not as my stuff, but also in wanting to understand more about it on a personal level so that I could change my state, but also to support her through her journey. So forgive me if there's lots of background noise. I hope you can hear me okay. I have to have the windows open because I'm going to melt otherwise. So let's get rolling. First and foremost, anxiety is not a disorder. There is nothing wrong with you if you at any point in your life feel anxious. I don't like to use the terminology I am anxious because it puts it at an identity level, which becomes essentially slightly disempowering. So anxiety is essentially a behavior, and it can be the result of the chronic activation of our fight and flight response that shows up as hypervigilance and restlessness. I thought this quote was great because in some way our culture and environment taught us that to stay safe, we need to constantly be on the lookout for danger and to urgently respond to the world around us. None of us are new to the fact that the world is a very fast-paced environment to live in right now, more so than ever. So we are responding to that accordingly as humans as we evolve, but also to evolve, we're needing to perhaps learn how to manage living in this slightly crazy world. So it's a perfectly natural state. So what is anxiety? Most of us here or watching on the replay will know that it is natural and it is extremely normal. Most people that sort of do anxiety on the daily or in a phase of going through an anxious state can feel almost like they're not normal, and then they take comfort in people that share anxiety or their own anxious states because it's sort of looking for validation. But it is perfectly normal and everyone experiences it from time to time. It normally manifests by feelings of unease, worry, fear, apprehension, and those manifestations are often set in a time in the future or possibly by looking back into the past. So it's often the fear of something that hasn't happened yet and may never happen. So you can worry about it now as if it's happened, or you can wait until the thing you think is going to happen happens and then deal with it accordingly. So our brain's primary function is to ensure our survival and well-being. And it does this by constantly assessing and responding to any potential threats in our environment. And anxiety is the response that stems from this innate drive for self-preservation. So our brain is basically trying to keep us safe. And often when we experience anxiety, it comes from a subconscious place. So it's triggered by a past experience, potentially those that our brain has taken a snapshot of and said, oh, this isn't good, I'm going to hide that. So when a situation arises like that in the future, I'll know how to respond to it. So it might draw upon memories to help us make safer choices. So if you were bitten by a dog as a child, say you were 4, you could have a fear of dogs as an adult, because every time you see a dog, your subconscious brain goes, wah, 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 danger, runs back down the timeline to that 4-year-old you and fires that within you that says, get away from the dog because you're not safe. And that is what we call in hypnotherapy an old program. And believe it or not, it's relatively easy to reframe. Not always, it depends on the circumstances, but mostly it's old software. And anxiety often stems from a desire for control. So our need as humans to be in control, whether that's keeping us safe or other reasons. And while it's natural that you want a sense of control over your life, excessive control seeking can just add to the stress and anxiety. So as we know, and I'm sure we've all experienced, it can vary from being, pretty intense, like I don't know whether I'm coming or going, to manageable or severely debilitating. So there's a few types of anxiety, but I really felt it was important to talk about the difference between natural anxiety that most of us can, suffer with or be aware of in day-to-day life, and the kind of anxiety that we would use the terminology as a hijack. So that anxiety that becomes so debilitating, you literally lose all control of your senses. So like your whole fight or flight or freeze kicks in. So natural anxiety is the normal response. So natural anxiety is can come about by stress or mild potential threats, and it's just a natural built-in survival mechanism. If we didn't have anxiety, how would we know to run from danger? So it's an internal compass, if you like, but most of us have perhaps heard about it spoken negatively, or we just don't want to face it, and so we spend our life just trying to ignore it, push it away, and actually lose an awareness around that it might actually be doing something to help us. So natural anxiety can be caused by triggers, different situations triggering us, such as public speaking or job interviews. I often get a little bit of natural anxiety before stepping up here in front of you lovely people. And obviously exams, driving tests, all of those things. And also, of course, life changes, moving house, changing jobs, major events. Most of us at some point or another would have feelings of anxiety around those events. And then natural anxiety can create physical symptoms within the body. So possibly the sweaty palms, increased heart rate, muscle tension. When you get that whole my neck and shoulders, like literally something sitting on my shoulders, and perhaps restlessness or nervousness. And the duration of natural anxiety, it tends to be pretty temporary and subsides once a perceived threat or stress has been removed. Once we've moved past that, it's like, oh, thank God, that's done. And things sort of regulate within the nervous system or start to. And its function, of course, as I was saying earlier, natural anxiety is helpful. We have to have it. It motivates you to prepare and stay alert, just in case there is actually something to be worried about. As a hypnotherapist, if somebody who is say, for example, very high in sports, just say like a can't think of an example, like a rock climber or something, and says, oh, I've got a bit of anxiety, can you help me like alleviate this? There still has to be a natural bit of anxiety there, because otherwise they're going to have no fear, and goodness knows where they're going to end up. So, yeah. And then we have the other state of anxiety, which is hijacks. So these tend to be really disproportionate responses to a situation. And I'd be curious if anybody has actually experienced this themselves, but something where you literally realize, oh my goodness, why am I responding? Why have I got so much fear? Why am I so scared of this thing? I really shouldn't be as scared of it as I am. So it's when the anxiety becomes really overwhelming, really intense, and just disproportionate to the situation. I'll give you an example. I had a great phobia of the dentist many years ago. And my friend came into work one day, and she hadn't been to the dentist for a long time. And I think I'd been about 10 years at the time. And one of her teeth had just cracked off in the night. And she had to go to A&E and basically have a whole tooth yanked out. And as she was telling me this story, I could literally feel myself sweating. And I'm like, wow, this is a really disproportionate response to this. So basically, I did some work, saw a hypnotherapist, shifted it all, and yeah, was absolutely fine to go to the dentist after that. Sorry, I'm just reading a question. Okay, I'm going to continue. I've noted the question, and we'll come back to it at the end if we've not sort of covered it. So, yeah, anxiety hijack, triggered by triggers. It may be triggered by specific situations. And again, the level is far more severe than what was typical to that situation. Physical and cognitive overload. During an anxiety attack, physical symptoms like panic. Excuse me, I'm just going to admit somebody in. Panic attacks, severe trembling, racing thoughts, and an ability to think clearly can occur. And again, duration, anxiety hijacks, they may not subside as easily. You might feel them a couple of days afterwards. You might feel like you've been on an emotional roller coaster, like you've sort of been through a washing machine. All of those feelings. It can be like an emotional hangover, if you like. It doesn't subside as naturally as a natural anxiety phase. And then interference with functioning, an anxiety attack can significantly, put my teeth back in, interfere with daily functioning. So that can make it challenging to go about daily things. And most of these anxiety attacks, or this anxiety hijacks, if they're more severe, there's normally a very, very good reason that's rooted in the subconscious mind. So what anxiety does is it usually triggers the fight, flight, or freeze response. So this is, again, a very natural reaction, which would be to tell us to run or fight, etc., etc. And in the context of anxiety, this response can become activated even when there is no immediate physical danger. So a flight response, if you're in a social environment, you might feel agitated, defensive, confrontational. Obviously, it doesn't mean you're about to go into a fight, literally, but it's basically, it's more that you want to literally just be on guard. And you could potentially be a bit more defensive than normal, a bit more argumentative. And then the flight response is obviously a strong urge to leg it, for want of a better word. This can manifest as a desire to leave a social event. If you are standing up in front of people in a meeting, you might want to run if you're feeling uncomfortable, or possibly even procrastinate on tasks that trigger anxiety. And so this is a response that is about creating distance from a perceived threat, which can feel uncomfortable, and or running from the anticipation of future stress. And then the freeze response is akin to feeling paralyzed or stuck. Literally don't know what to do with yourself. So you might find it challenging to make decisions, communicate, or take any action if the anxiety is overwhelming you. And this often leads to avoidance. Let's just avoid the situations that make us feel like this, right? Because it just keeps me safe. It makes me feel better. So that would be the case for any of these things. Anything that triggers off these responses, it's just safer to avoid them, which just keeps us out of growth, basically, as opposed to into growth. So most of us, I'm sure, have experienced these levels of anxiety on some level. But I just love this quote when I saw it the other day. Instead of bracing yourself for the perils of the unknown, embrace the joy that is here in your present moment. Now, the reason I've highlighted this is because anxiety is very much based on fear of the future or deliberating and stressing about something that's happened in the past. I cannot stress to you enough how important it is to be in the present moment. I think this has possibly become a mantra between me and my mother, who I love dearly, that there is absolutely, it would be the biggest thing to focus on out of everything is how I feel. It may not be for you, but it's so powerful. We know the power of the present moment. I've had conversations in the past where, I'll use my mother as the example, where she's been very fearful of something that's happening in a week. And I've asked her what she's going to have for dinner that night. And her response has been, well, I don't know, it's not dinner time yet. And I've been able to say, okay, so you don't know what you're going to have for dinner tonight. So how do you know how you're going to feel for this event in a week's time? You don't. So you're wasting all this energy planning, deciding what's going to happen in the future, how you're going to respond to it, how everyone else is going to respond to it. And you're out in the future, a week down the line, you've created a whole scenario. When you actually get there, the likelihood of that happening is pretty slim. And the likelihood you feel today about that thing out in the future, it's likely you're not going to feel anywhere near that feeling. So as much as possible, be aware of being in the present moment. So here's the fun bit. We have lots and lots of different ways of dealing with and managing anxiety. It may not be that it clears the anxiety fully. It may just be that it puts you in a more comfortable state. And anything more than nothing is something. So these are in no particular order, but I have weighted the ones I think to be the more stronger cause at the top. So acknowledge the anxiety. Begin by acknowledging and accepting that you are feeling anxious. You're not anxious. You're feeling anxious. You're playing out an anxious behavior. And understand that the anxiety is normal. And what I would say to this is acknowledging it, accepting it as best you can. Just try not to feed it. And what I mean by feeding it is, if there's a specific thing you're anxious about, if you imagine it comes in quite small, the more you start giving it energy, it starts to get bigger and things add on to it. So it's like a magnet. Something clicks in here. Oh, what about that? What if this is going to happen? And then maybe that person's going to say that, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So if you can catch any anxious thought as it arrives, before it starts to, and be aware of it and be like, okay, I'm feeling this now. Let's look at some other tools I could deal with, I could use. Might even be something simple like going for a walk or turning the TV on, or something that would distract you. Acknowledge the anxiety and allow it to be and try not to feed it. Try not to catastrophize and add other things on, because before you know it, you might be worrying about starting a new job. Before you know it, you'll be worrying about the holiday you've got booked 2 months down the line, and how's your new boss going to think about that, and blah, 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 blah. These are just very loose, pulled out of my nose examples. So accept it and be with it in that moment, and try some tools to alleviate it rather than feed it. Present moment, we've discussed that. Be here now. This is where the power is. Not what happened last week, not what you think is going to happen next week. If you're unsure of how to be here now, a really simple thing to do is engage your 5 senses. So fully experience your surroundings. Name 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. If you're really feeling it, you can name 5 of each. But it's a really, really lovely way of connecting to the environment you're in. Just be aware of the air on your skin, the smell of coffee, whatever it might be. And connect back to yourself, because all of this is going on within you. It's bringing up old stuff, it's stories, it's all of that. Your heart's possibly racing. So if it works for you, give yourself a moment just to stop, acknowledge the feelings, maybe place your hand on your heart, call your energy back. You'll probably notice if you're anxious that you're out thinking about everything and everybody and what's happening and stories, and bring it back. And I fully appreciate that when we're in an anxious state, these things aren't often easy. They become a practice. They become a practice. So acceptance and non-judgment. I've spoken a bit about acceptance, but practicing a non-judgmental attitude towards your thoughts and feelings. Be kind to yourself. When you're in the present moment, accept your current state. Try not to label it as good or bad. It just is. It's how you're feeling, and that's fine. And that's going to reduce the added layer of judgment. If you can speak kindly to yourself and not be like, oh, this old thing again, why has that come up? I thought we were worried about that last week. It's not going to help you. So nurture yourself, and maybe if it helps, give yourself the advice you'd give to a best friend or a daughter or a son. Then tapping, my good old favourite. Obviously, there's a full EFT tapping that's available, something I do myself and hold space for over at Odyssey The Platform. But if you are in a moment and you just want a quick fix or a quick support, I'm a big fan of fast tapping. If you're worrying about work or you're on an aeroplane, left and right, you can do it on your collarbone. I always do collarbone, probably because it's the easiest example. You can do it on your knees, but it's got to be fast. So it's like if you're sat on an aeroplane and you hit turbulence and it's making you anxious, tap, 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 tap. Who cares what anyone else thinks? Not their business. You can do it on your knees. You can even do it on your arms. But it has to be fast. And if you're anxious and you're feeling like you need some calm, we come back to the good old butterfly hug. Many of you on here might have done this before. If you haven't, it's very simple. It's crossing your arms so you're already in a hug state, and very gently tapping left to right whilst breathing. Always helps to breathe. So you can do this anywhere, anytime. It's a really, really beautiful way of not only giving yourself a little bit of nurture, but also of just calming the nervous system. And whilst you're doing this, you can also run with some affirmations. There's plenty more of those to come on the next few pages, but you can run with some affirmations. I'm safe. I'm held. I'm okay. Whatever works for you. Conscious awareness with anxiety. Being aware of your thoughts. Tricky one, this, because the mind likes to have a little wander, and before you know it, you're worrying about something you didn't even realize you needed to be worrying about. Again, humanness. But be aware of your thoughts. Are they serving you, or are they scaring you? And at any time, you can choose to reach for a more positive thought or memory. So if your brain is running a story that is making you feel worse, how can you change that and remind yourself of something else, or remind yourself of something positive? And if your anxiety involves imagining the worst case scenario, challenge these thoughts. What is this worst case scenario? What's the evidence to prove that it might happen? It's what I was saying earlier. When we run out into the future, we start deciding what's going to happen and how we're going to feel. And the more we tap into that scenario, the more we're creating that story, the more the anxiety is rising within us. But there's absolutely zero evidence to prove that any of those things are going to come true. And isn't it wonderful to know that we have the power to change that story? So intuition. Anxiety is normally linked to your intuition. It's your body speaking to you. So maybe there is something that needs changing. Maybe you're not honouring yourself. Maybe you're saying yes to things when your body is actually saying no. So it's learning to trust your intuition. I did a talk about this last week, about connecting to your inner guidance. The more in tune with your intuition you are, the more you're going to register when anxiety comes up. I know why that is. I said yes to this thing and I really, really, really don't want to do it. You can dig into deeper about why you don't want to do it if you don't want to, but the important thing is to be honouring yourself. The more you honour yourself, the less anxiety will come up. But if you're in a space of trying to be someone you're not, trying to push through things, especially if you're already in a slightly anxious state, the likelihood is it's just going to exacerbate the anxiety. So keep tuning into your intuition. Ask the part of you that knows, the part of you that needs to know the information if you're feeling anxious, and just be aware of how that helps. Good old nature and grounding. Huge fan of nature, because we are nature. We're not separate from nature. We forget this, or we seem to be told otherwise. But nature and anxiety, hand in hand. Get outside, and if you can, go barefoot. Get your feet in the grass every time. My answer to everything. But it's truly beautiful for nature, especially if you do 5 things you can see whilst you're there, etc., etc. Because why would you not? You're bound to see some beautiful things. And meditation. If you feel called or inclined, or you do meditate, or even just sitting in peace, sitting quietly on a bench in the park, any of those things, it just helps to calm and regulate the nervous system. Even if it's 5 minutes a day, it doesn't have to be huge. You can just put on some nice music and chill. It's just about bringing about peace. We live in such a fast environment, all of us, and we're not geared as humans to live in that kind of fast-paced environment. So meditation, taking some time out, it's a great way of reducing anxiety. But also meditation comes in the form of walking, dancing, cooking, all these things that sort of get us doing something, get us out of our head, keeps us in the moment, etc. Deep breathing. So great to be aware of your breath, because normally if you're in a state of anxiety, you're shallow breathing up high. I'm not trained in breath work, might be on the list. But you can do a simple breathing technique, which I do use myself. So inhale deeply through your nose for a count of 4, hold for 4, and exhale slowly through your mouth for a count of 6. And then just repeat as necessary. Just be aware of, especially if you're in a highly anxious state, of breathing in through your nose. Basically, if you breathe in through your mouth a lot, that it sort of gives this sort of false sense of doing something, but actually it can just raise anxiety levels. So breathe in through your nose, please. Physical activity, excuse me. Engage in regular physical activity as much as possible. Doesn't have to be huge, could just be a little bit of stretching, but exercise on any level, walking, stretching, yoga, obviously is very calming by default. Go to a gentle class, whatever you do. Releases endorphins, natural mood lifters, what's not to love? And take this from somebody who was about exercise a lot for many years. Once you build it into your life, you kind of wonder how you ever did without it. And never thought I'd hear myself saying that. So yeah, even if it's a little bit here and there, it's always going to help with anxiety. Practicing gratitude. Focus on what you're grateful for. There will always be something. It might be the smallest thing. You might have seen some sunshine. You might have heard a beautiful bird. Somebody might have given you an amazing cup of coffee. It doesn't have to be big. But if you can, whether you have a journal or a gratitude journal specific, 3 things at the end of the day, every day, incredible, very, very powerful. And researchers have discovered that it activates the part of the brain responsible for releasing feel-good chemicals like serotonin and dopamine. So this basically triggers the same response as Prozac would. In fact, sometimes it's been considered that gratitude is more powerful than Prozac. So what's not to love? What's not to love? And I would say if you can do this every day, I'd say possibly evening is better, because what it does is it gets your brain into, subconsciously, you're out and about and you're suddenly thinking, oh, that was nice, I must note that later. And you won't even realize you're doing it, or you might. Oh, that bird's amazing. I wonder if I put that down as my thing later. Oh, this was beautiful. So it programs the brain to start looking for the good. So simple and so beautiful. Goes without saying, be aware of what you're putting into your body, what you're feeding your body, mind, body, soul, right? So, you know, maintaining a balanced, nutritious diet and avoiding caffeine and sugar. Possibly, if you're in highly anxious states, particularly caffeine, well, possibly particularly sugar as well. But anxiety, all of us, I'm sure, have had an experience at some point or another where we've had one coffee too many and it's been like, oh my God, I feel like my heart's going to jump out of my chest. Not good if you're feeling a little bit on edge. So same's also going to apply to alcohol. We all know the effects that alcohol can have on the body, the brain, the body. And we sort of think that these things support anxiety, and actually they have the total opposite effect. My mother was a huge smoker for years, and her tagline was, well, it helps my anxiety. Actually didn't, not at all. In fact, probably made it worse. So positive self-talk, mentioned this a little bit earlier. Talk to yourself as you would a close friend in this situation. I say this because we are all guilty of berating ourselves. Why am I feeling like this again? Why can't I just be normal? I mean, the list is endless, right? We've all done it. But just try your best to be aware of how you're talking to yourself and to challenge negative thinking with positive self-talk rather than negative, as best as you can. If you're feeling in a particular anxious state, you might want to limit your time on social media. In fact, you might want to limit your time on gadgets, full stop, and get out in nature and talk to the birds. But obviously, you might want to limit exposure to distressing news, social media, noise, what everyone else is doing, fear of missing out, all of that stuff. And definitely before bedtime, if for no other reason, then you will probably sleep better. And of course, you know, we're bombarded by information from all different portals these days, and it can lead to increased anxiety. So choose where you let your energy go, especially before bed. Self-care, prioritize your self-care. So self-care is around most of the things I've talked about already: exercise, balanced diet, sleep, time with loved ones, time with pets, salt baths, swimming, whatever it is that you need to do that makes you feel good. And then healthy distractions. So I would say don't rush to distract before acknowledging the anxiety, but once you've acknowledged it, I think it's often a good idea to distract, especially if it's something that is just going to be there. Like, put a pin in it, leave it over there. I don't need to think about that until next week. And then find something that sparks joy that you love to do. Go off and do something else. Talk to your favorite people, get into a hobby, get out in nature, creative pursuits. And all of these should help improve your mood. Then downtime and being aware of how you feel throughout the day. So many of us are in jobs and experiences where we are like, got deadlines, pushing. Again, human constructs. We weren't meant to work this way. We weren't geared for the 9 to 5. So because of that, we can often have anxiety through work or through just getting through the day because, should be doing, a word that should be banned from the English language. But anyway, it's with us. So we have full control and we say when. And so check in with yourself through the day. If you need to, set an alarm, maybe set an alarm hourly, and ask yourself, how am I feeling? What do I need right now? And, take breaks when you can. Schedule them in if you need to. And then in those moments or in that time when you're not in that environment, do whatever you do that brings joy. Joy it goes without saying, if you can get yourself into things that make you feel good, make you feel joyous, uplift your energy, raise a smile, just bring up the vibes. It's not always easy. You're not always going to feel like it. But when you can make the shifts, sometimes you end up talking yourself around from a negative state into a positive one. Get into something that brings joy. And that's going to involve probably doing something creative, getting out in nature, all of those things, whatever joy means for you. And make sure you get quality sleep, especially if you are experiencing quite high anxiety, hijacked anxiety. Lack of sleep can exacerbate anxiety. We all know that. And especially if you are partaking in alcohol affects the sleep. So you've got a double whammy of potentially waking up the next morning feeling even worse than you did the day before. So be aware of what you need to sleep well, and maybe establish a good bedtime routine. I'm definitely queen of the morning routine. My bedtime routine could do with a little bit of tweaking, I think. But maybe, for me, I have a diffuser with lavender oil if I'm feeling particularly anxious for any reason. Fresh air in the room, not watching anything too late at night, reading something calming before bed, etc., etc. Then we have good old journaling. It's not for everyone, but if you haven't tried it, maybe you might try it. You might be curious about it. It's a great way to help you gain insights into your triggers and patterns of anxiety. One thing I would say is I've journaled for years. I used to call it writing a diary back in the day. And what I would say now from my own personal experience of journaling is if you are having a journal session where you're getting stuff off your chest that perhaps is a bit negative, and that's fine, always end it on something positive. So maybe throw in a bit of gratitude at the end, so let's turn the energy around, something you're grateful for, something that brings joy, something that makes you want to get up in the morning, someone that makes you want to get up in the morning. I think it's really important to do that if you're having a bit of a brain dump in a journal. So some ideas for journal prompts: gratitude and appreciation, 3 things you're grateful for. Obviously, we've discussed that. Self-love, reflect on what you love about yourself. I'll give you permission to use like if the word love is uncomfortable. But yeah, what do you like about yourself? What do you love about yourself? Acts of kindness. Write about a recent act of kindness you performed or received. How did it make you feel? Visualization. Imagining a scene or scenario where you feel completely at peace and free from anxiety. How does that look? How does that feel? What might that bring into your life? And nature again. Recall a recent event or experience in nature and write down how that made you feel and what you appreciated most about it. Joyful moments. 3 things from your day when you felt genuine joy or happiness. Be curious how many you could recall from today. And what triggered these moments? What was it? Might be something really simple. And then release and let go. So write about any worries or anxieties that have been weighing you down. That's kind of what I started with. So imagine placing them in a balloon and letting them float away. I release you. I bless you with love and I release you. Good old Louise Hay classic. Future happiness. Envision a future scenario where you are free from anxiety and leading a joyful life. Describe what this life looks like, how it looks and feels to you. Energy alignment. Reflect on the activities or practices that make you feel more aligned with positive energy. How can you incorporate more of these into your daily life? And then beautiful inner child healing. We all have an inner child that needs nurturing. And actually, often some of these anxiety triggers may come from our childhood. So consider how you would nurture and heal your inner child. Maybe they need to go for an ice cream or jump on the swings. Write about how loving and caring for your inner child can provide comfort and reassurance. And then affirmations. I think affirmations are a great tool. They can become like a mantra. You might just find one that you love. You might find one that you love for weeks, and then you go off it and you find another one. You might find ones that you use at different times of day. Some of these are ones I have used for sure. Some you may recognize. I am safe. All is well in my world. I think it's really important because I think anxiety can often be feeling unsafe. I am always doing the best I can. And it's really important, especially if there's work-related anxiety, to remind yourself of that. I give myself permission. I think sometimes we need to give ourselves permission. We don't give ourselves enough permission in life. So what do you need to give yourself permission for today? I am divinely protected. I choose to feel. Choose to feel alive. I choose to feel happy. I choose to feel loved. Only positive thoughts come to me. That one could be more of a challenge if you're feeling pretty anxious at the time. Well, this one is one that I use with my mother quite a lot. I release the need to scare myself. When we're doing our anxiety, the more we add to it, if we're not careful, if we don't catch it at the beginning, the more we add to it, the more we feed it, the bigger it gets. At that point, we are scaring ourselves. So you can just release it. I release the need to scare myself. I trust my intuition to guide me in the right direction. One of my favourites, very simple. I'm not even sure if it can be put into affirmation bracket actually, but I am that I am. So simple, very beautiful. I am that I am. I choose to focus on the present and let go of the past and future. And obviously you could say let go of the future or let go of the past. You don't have to use both of them. And another classic of Louise Hay's, I trust in the process of life. Life is happening for you, it's not happening to you. There's nothing that you're not learning through these scenarios, even if it feels hard. And finally, if anxiety is significantly interfering with your life, considering seeking help. I work as a transformational hypnotherapist through Odyssey The Platform, and the way I work is by first resourcing you so you feel safer, you feel stronger within yourself. And then we look at maybe old software, maybe things that happened in the past that need a bit of reframing. There's no watches dangling. There's nothing like that involved at all. It all comes from within you, and you're pretty much fully conscious of what's happening. And it's a very powerful, beautiful technique. So I'm also available if anybody wants to do EFT sessions. EFT is fantastic for anxiety as well. So I just wanted to end on this. This is a Louise Hay quote, which interestingly enough came to me in my yoga class yesterday. I am one with the very power that created me, and this power has given me the power to create my own circumstances. I rejoice in the knowledge that I have the power of my own mind to use in any way I choose. Every moment of life is a new beginning point as we move from the old. This moment is a new point of beginning for me right here and right now. All is well in my world.